and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Ladi Akeridoluwale. The headlines. UN humanitarian chief confirms latest rescue operations underway at Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. Ukrainian president warns that the shelling of the steel plant is not stopping, even as civilians are being taken out. And two Ukrainian sisters who escaped from Mariupol hope for reunion with the mother they left behind. Ukraine has said almost 500 more civilians have been evacuated from the southeastern city of Mariupol since a United Nations-led rescue operation began, including some people from the besieged Azovstal steel plant. Andriy Yermak, head of the Ukrainian president's office, called the evacuation a complex operation and said Ukraine will continue to do everything to save all civilians and the military. Earlier, the UN had said it was providing support, including psychological support to the survivors who have been evacuated from the southern city. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, in his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin last week, said he had stressed the need for enabling humanitarian access and evacuations from besieged areas, including first and foremost Mariupol.
It is good to know that even in these times of hyper-communications, silent diplomacy is still possible and is sometimes the only effective way to produce results. So far in total, nearly 500 civilians found long-awaited relief after living under relentless shelling and scarce availability of water, food and sanitation. I hope that the continued coordination with Moscow and Kyiv will lead to more humanitarian pauses to allow civilians safe passage from the fighting and aid to reach those in critical needs. We must continue to do all we can to get people out of these hellscapes. The war on Ukraine is senseless in scope, restless in its dimensions, and limitless in its potential for global harm. The cycle of death, destruction, dislocation, and disruption must stop. It is high time to unite and end this war, and I thank you.
We must hold those in Russia who unleashed, perpetrated, and ordered the war crimes committed in Ukraine to account. The United States supports a range of international investigations into the atrocities in Ukraine, including efforts by the International Criminal Court.
Russia struggles to advance and suffers terrible losses. This is the reason why they resort to this desperate missile terror across Ukraine. They want to break us down, but the only thing that will break down in the end is Russia and its capacity to invade, bomb, murder, loot, and rape.
Meanwhile, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has devastated hundreds of hospitals and other institutions and left doctors without drugs to tackle cancer or the ability to perform surgery, and that's according to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Mr. Zelensky, in a video address to a Brave Ukraine fundraising event being held in the United Kingdom, said many places lacked even basic antibiotics in eastern and southern Ukraine, the focal points of the fighting. Mr. Zelensky said the evacuation of civilians from the besieged port city of Mariupol had continued, and in spite of that, Russian forces were still storming and shelling the Azovstal plant where civilians and military forces are sheltering.
If
we take only the medical infrastructure to date, Russians have destroyed or damaged almost 400 health facilities. These are hospitals, maternity hospital, outpatient clinics. In the temporarily occupied areas of Ukraine in the east and south, the situation with access to medical service and medicine is just catastrophic. Even the simplest medications are missing. Russia has brought to Ukraine and Europe such problems that we could not have imagined a few months ago. Today, we continue the rescue operation from Mariupol with the assistance of the United Nations and the international community of the Red Cross. People are on their way to safe territory. Currently, Russian shelling and the assault on Azovstal do not stop, but civilians still need to be taken out. Women, children. Many children remain there. Just imagine this hell. There are children there. More than 2 months of constant shelling, bombing, constant death nearby.
Обстрілів, бомбардувань, постійної смерті поруч.
2 people have died as a result of shelling in Luhansk, and that's according to the region's governor. Serhiy Hadi confirmed on Telegram that 16 times the enemy opened fire on residential areas and infrastructure. 12 buildings, an electrical substation, a complex of commercial facilities were damaged. 7 more houses were destroyed in Rubiz, 2 in Novorossiysk, and that's according to what he posted on the platform. And United States First Lady Jill Biden has departed Washington for a whirlwind tour of Romania and Slovakia to highlight the U.S. commitment to Ukrainian refugees over Mother's Day weekend. The wife of President Joe Biden is due to meet U.S. service members and embassy personnel, displaced Ukrainian parents and children, humanitarian aid workers and teachers during the 4-day trip. Mrs. Biden will also meet Romania's First Lady, Carmen Ahonassis, an English teacher, as well as the President of Slovakia, Zuzana Kapitova. On Sunday, May the 8th, celebrated as Mother's Day in the United States, Mrs. Biden will meet Ukrainian mothers and children who have been forced to flee their homes because of Russia's war against Ukraine. Among those accompanying her are Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, Karen Dunford, Senior Director for Multilateral Affairs at the National Security Council, Curtis Reed, amongst others.
I just wanted to say thank you to you all for coming on the trip. I really appreciate it. It's so important to the President and to me that the Ukrainian people know that we stand with them. So I hope you have a good flight.
The Pentagon's press secretary says there are no indications that Belarus plans to get involved in the war in Ukraine. Speaking on the drills being conducted by Belarusian armed forces, John Kirby told journalists that they are not tracking indications that they are planning to or intend to get directly involved in the war in Ukraine. Kirby also confirmed the U.S. is not seeing a change in the behavior of Russian forces or the aggressive momentum in the lead-up to May 9th. He added that the Russians have not made the progress that we believe they expect to make by this point in Donbass. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has denied providing specific targeting information to Ukraine to sink the Moskva, a Russian-guided missile cruiser that was the flagship of Moscow's fleet in the Black Sea. Authorities in Fiji have seized a $300 million yacht belonging to Russian oligarch Suleiman Karimov at the request of the United States. This is coming from the Justice Department, just as Washington and its allies pressed Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. A Fiji court had ruled on Tuesday that the United States could seize the super yacht weeks after it arrived and was impounded by police. Authorities in various countries have seized luxury vessels and villas owned by Russian billionaires in response to sanctions imposed on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, which Russia calls a special military operation. Karimov was sanctioned by the United States in 2014 and 2018 in response to Russia's actions in Syria and Ukraine, and had also been sanctioned by the European Union. The U.S. Justice Department's task force, Kleptocapture, has focused on seizing yachts and other luxury assets to put the finances of Russian oligarchs under strain in a bid to pressure Russian President Vladimir Putin over the war in Ukraine. The luxury vessel, the Armadia, arrived in Fiji last month after an 18-day voyage across the Pacific from Mexico. The U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control had designated Mr. Karimov as part of a group of Russian oligarchs who profit from the Russian government through corruption and its activities around the globe, including the occupation of Crimea.
Department of Justice announced that the Fijian law enforcement executed a seizure warrant freezing the motor yacht Amadea, a 348-foot luxury vessel owned by sanctioned Russian oligarch Suleiman Kerimov. The yacht is worth approximately $300 million or more. This was done with support and assistance from the FBI, and Fiji acted at the request of the Department of Justice. Following issuance of a seizure warrant from the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, Fijian authorities executed the request, obtaining a domestic seizure warrant from a Fijian court. As you know, the president has made clear we will go after Russian oligarchs and their ill-gotten gains using every authority we have to hold them accountable. Oh, and here is the yacht. Look at that. I went to really go out with a bang, so we got a yacht, just to make the point about oligarchs.
And staying with sanctions, Hungary says it cannot support the European Union's new sanctions package against Russia in its present form, including an embargo on Russian crude oil exports and imports as well. The Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán, said that the European Commission's current proposal would amount to a, quote, atomic bomb dropped on the Hungarian economy, adding that Hungary was ready to negotiate if it sees a new proposal that would meet Hungarian interests. We'll get back to that discussion, to the discussion we're supposed to have on that in just a moment. But meanwhile, Germany will deliver 7 self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine on top of 5 the Dutch already pledged. That's according to the defense minister. The training of Ukrainian troops on artillery weapons can start next week in Germany. Kirsten Lambrecht told reporters in the Slovak town of Sliac, where she was supposed to meet her Dutch counterpart later on today. Grad rockets from positions outside the village of Mala Rohan as locals walked past burnt tanks and demolished homes. Only a few residents remained in the village north of Kharkiv, liberated from Russian troops in late March. Burned out tanks and the wreckage of damaged cars as well as demolished homes were visible in the village. Ukraine's second biggest city and one of the hardest hit, Kharkiv, has been battered since the start of the Russian invasion. Let's talk now to Navy Commodore Oluwatoyin Olawumi, who used to be Chief of Intelligence at the time in the Nigerian Armed Forces, and of course is a military expert and strategist. Thank you very much for joining us, Commodore Olawumi. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
10 weeks on with this situation in Ukraine, with the war, the invasion, whatever one wants to call it, did you think that 10 weeks on there would still be this battle in Ukraine?
Yeah, thank you for that wonderful questions. Actually, as a military expert and looking at the strength of the Russians, I actually believe that by now the war should have been over. But, you know, in wars, sometimes never say never, because I'm surprised that the Ukrainians were able to actually withstand the Russians this much. And I'm not also surprised because I know they are getting helps from the NATO countries.
The other thing, of course, at this point is that it is looking as if militarily, quite a number of people have considered that militarily this is almost at a stalemate. But there are pressures on both sides to accommodate peace. Do you think, given your own experience in the background, and you alluded to it when you talked about getting help, that one way or the other, either with the help of NATO and the EU, Ukraine could prevail, or the Russians are simply too strong and that eventually some kind of accommodation will have to be come to by Ukraine, which gives Russia most of what it wants?
Yeah, unknown to a lot of people following this war, they have to think about what happened during the Cold War era. This is going to be a long haul. This war is going to go a long haul because for the allies, I want to refer to the NATO countries as allies. I think it's an opportunity for them to decimate the Russian aggression. They've done it in maybe Syria and Georgia, Tbilisi, they've done it in Crimea and so on. I think they just want to use this opportunity to turn them to like North Korea in the long run. So it's going to be a long haul. There's a difference between battle and war. War is a series of battles. I want to predict that in Mariupol, for example, the Russians are going to win the battle. And I want to advise the NATO countries and maybe some of the people that are following the Ukrainians that this is the time for them to be good soldiers. A good soldier is that soldier that lives to fight another day. They should just surrender and try to see whether they can live to fight another day in Mariupol. But as I said, war is a series of battles, and if they win in Mariupol, there are other theater of operation that is still left to be conquered. But believe me, this is going to be a long haul. It's not going to end soon. And I think the NATO are going to use this opportunity to actually put the Russians into where they belong. I think they return them to North Korea.
The many people, of course, also following this war do not seem to bear in mind, and I bring this up because you're a Navy man. Russia has a very large Navy, a very large Navy in that area, which was why the sinking of the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet was so important. Do you think that that part of the battle, the use of the Navy, we know that many of the missiles and the shells that are being fired into parts of Ukraine, including Mariupol, are coming from warships in the Black Sea. How important do you think a Navy is? And Ukraine doesn't really have much of a Navy to speak of. How important do you think a Navy is in this kind of situation?
No, for Russians, the Black Sea is their theater, and I think they need to hold on to the Black Sea for them to be able to actually, launch long-range missiles, the place of their choosing. But I must warn at this point that there's what we call revolution in military warfare. I mean, before we never knew that drones can be used in the way and manner it's being used today. So even though the Ukrainians don't have a strong navy or their navy has disappeared, I think the use of drone and especially kamikaze drones is going to be very, very useful in this theater. But I know that the Russian submarines and their heavy warships can actually do a lot of damage to the Ukrainians if they don't have an answer to it. So I will advise the Ukrainians to use more of their drones and try to actually suppress the fire that will be coming from the sea.
You referenced it in your answer to the last question, and that, of course, that's where the issue of drones comes in. The Air Force, there are those who say that he who controls the skies is in charge of the war and can decide when it is won or not. So far, it does appear as if the Russians have control of the skies, and that's why they're able to do so much damage in Ukraine. Nobody is able to compete. The Ukrainians as yet do not have enough to face them down. In the long run, even the midterm, how devastating do you think that advantage could be?
Yeah, that's a very technical question. In the beginning of the operations, I expect that the Russians could have actually knocked out all the air defense system of the Ukrainians. Surprisingly, they do not have a complete control of the airspace, which they're supposed to have done within 48 hours of that operation. Now, the Ukrainians now have these mobile and portable anti-air Stinger missiles and so on. And with the NATO allies bringing in more weapons, sophisticated weapons now, I don't see how the Russians are going to have a complete control of that airspace. Remember that some of the old MiG from Poland are beginning to find their way into Ukraine. I must tell you that the Russians missed the opportunity to have a total control of the airspace of Ukraine, even though they dominated. But we've had a lot of success from the tactical unit of Ukrainian soldiers. And I believe that they are going to bog down the Russians so much so that in the next 10 years, Russians may actually go in the way of some of these North Korea and some of these pariah states. I think it was a mistake for Russia to do what they did. I know they are provoked by the NATO movements towards the east, but I think there are better ways of, doing what they did. Because look at the number of lives that have been lost, and I think that the opportunity is now here for Putin to find a way out. I know that he's waiting for May 9 to declare that he has, won this war, or to march on the street of Mariupol. But I think post May 9, I think he should try to give peace a chance. Otherwise, Russians are going to be sent to the third world level in the next 10 years. Because outside the war and the battle going on, the economic aspect is there. Russians are being isolated by almost everybody. And I think it's a matter of time that they're going to capitulate, It happened during the Gorbachev, and I think it's going to happen again.
Let's look at this. Before I let you go, I want us to look at this strategically. And you referenced it also in your answer there. The Russians feel they are being encircled by NATO. If Ukraine joins NATO, then what used to be the adversary will be right at the doorstep. It will be sharing a border with Russia. That's the thinking. And already many of the republics that used to be part of the former Soviet Union have since joined either NATO or the EU or both of them. And so Russia has a feeling that it's being encircled and that is in preparation for its attack or its destruction, slowly sipping life out of it. If all your neighbors are enemies of yours, then of course. Now, militarily, in terms of strategy, you've said that it was wrong for Russia to invade Ukraine, and there are many people who feel that way. But what was the alternative if this is what was being done?
Yeah, the options are many. Aside the old Warsaw Pact and the NATO, we have new organizations that are actually, sprouting up every day. You have the BRICS. The Russians have the opportunity to join strength with China, with Iran, and with some of these Asian countries, and form a very formidable economic bloc. And disregard whatever NATO is doing. Look at China. China is rising. China has never fought a war in the past maybe 50 years or more. So I don't know why Russia feels that going to war is going to find a solution. Of course, the objective is not going to be met, because at the end of the day, he's going to be tied down in Ukraine. At the end of the day, he cannot win that war. You remember the Berlin War, the East and West Germany. In the long run, whatever territory he has taken now will be taken back from him. So I think it's a wrong move. I think he could have developed his economy with China, with Iran, with some of these other South American countries that are actually disposed towards him, and go the China way. China is one of the second largest world power today. They didn't fight any war. So I think the options are there, but I believe that in the long run, Putin may be giving Kennedy's treatment, because he has crossed the red line by threatening with nuke. Once you do that, you are jeopardizing the entire security of this globe. and nobody's going to allow that to happen. During the Cuban crisis in 1963, Jeff Kennedy actually threatened with atomic bomb. And what happened to JFK? My prediction is that any leader that threatens the world peace with nuclear power is going to be given JFK treatments in the long run. So I think the way this thing is going to be resolved is going to be so easy that it's not the way we are looking at it. Because once Putin is out of circulation, I think there's going to be peace in Europe.
Indeed. Thank you so very much, Commodore Oravi, for your time and for your perspective on the program this morning. Thank you for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Still ahead on Russian invasion. Greenpeace protests against use of Russian gas at Spanish LNG plant. Details in a moment. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying with us. Greenpeace activists climbed a chimney at an LNG plant in southern Spain and dangled from ropes, carrying banners reading "Gas Fuels War" in protest against Nitrogen's use of Russian gas, which is being used to finance the war in Ukraine. Dressed in red overalls and wearing yellow helmets, the activists swung a huge banner from one of the buildings reading "Nitrogen finances the war," in reference to the energy company's use of Russian gas to provide electricity. Greenpeace actions at the Nitrogen LNG plant in Hempia near the southern city of Malaha involved 30 activists. The NGO's head of climate, Jose Luis Garcia Ortega, says Greenpeace says the war in Ukraine has made it evident that depending on dirty fuel makes countries vulnerable.
And they still need gas. So I don't think that the short-term recession 2022 is going to stop them investing in gas. And of course, they're actually, I think, going through the process right now in the EU of designating natural gas as a transition fuel, which would allow the European companies to invest in Nigeria on that. I do know there's been discussions between the federal government and the European Union. There's a conference next month, the EU economic conferences. The EU in Nigeria is hosting in Lagos. Gas has become, I think, part of the central part of what that was about. Originally it was agriculture, but now people recognize gas. So I think the momentum is there. I think it's just really critical that the federal government is actively having these discussions in the NPC with the investors who would be bringing the capital that can expand the gas. And of course, we already export quite a lot of gas. We have the capacity to ramp up production. We have the capacity to increase the capital invested to ramp it up even more. But that has to happen urgently to solve Germany and Europe's energy challenge at this time.
Before I let you go, I must ask about this, though. One thing that seems to be fairly widespread between those who are within the gas industry is that, unlike oil, in the case of gas, most gas supplies are locked in long term. There's a certain stability in supplies, and those who are delivering want to lock both prices and delivery times in. So you have a situation where supplies are locked in for, at the very minimum, a year, sometimes more in advance. Do you think any of that plays a role in the plan you've just talked about, especially because one could assume that many of those who produce, Nigeria inclusive, some of the Middle Eastern countries as well, that produce that have already had their supplies locked in for some time. So end of this year might not be realistic.
Well, I mean, part of it is increasing production. So we haven't locked in where the increased production goes. So there has to be some capital. I know there's capacity in the existing capital investment in Nigeria. There's capacity in the gas industry to ramp up production. So that's where you start. To create new capacity for production, I mean, typically before it might have been 5 or 7 years. I think people will now come up with ways of accelerating that. So if we put in new capital to the next gas train in Nigeria, train 8, train 9, train 10, which was tens of billions of dollars. But that investment will now come much faster because of the urgency of the situation. So it really has been a game changer. We were in a situation where I didn't think before the invasion that we would get any investment for gas. And now I think it's totally open for us to do that. And of course, it fits. I mean, the Vice President's Excellency was talking about just energy transition. We didn't cause global warming, so why should our gas resources not be used on a global stage because of that? This has really changed that equation on there, and I think we really need to take advantage of it. I mean, and you can see how difficult it is. Oil, particularly onshore oil in particular, to produce at the levels required to make a difference to the economy. The gas is there for Nigeria to take, and I just really think it's time to step up and make sure we're taking advantage of the situation. As terrible as it is, Germany needs our gas.
Indeed, Andrew, thank you so much for that. I'm sure we'll have you back not too distant a time, because quite a number of tough economic decisions are up in a very short while. But for now, thank you so much for your perspective and time this morning.
Thank you so much.
Let's take a break. When we come back, Ini John Mekwa will join us for the other business stories of the hour as it pertains Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. And as promised, here is Ini John Mekwa. Ini, morning.
Good morning.
Russians are fleeing to Dubai. And I was talking to Andrew just before the break there about the Middle East and how they're coming into the equation of what has happened here. Why are they doing that?
Well, because there's no restriction. For one, international flights to and from Russia has been hugely restricted. But Emirates still does both cargo and passenger flights, from the UAE to Dubai. So it's really easy for them. And then, Dubai or the UAE have not criticized them, so there are no sanctions. There's nothing to hold them, so they make it easy. They're giving them visas, and a lot of them are making Dubai their second home or home for now.
Moving capital there.
Yeah, they're moving capital there, buying a lot of real estate. Real estate seems to be a good hedge at this time. Some real estate consultants, they said they even have to employ Russian-speaking people now just to cater for the Russians who are coming there. So it's really a huge one. They say real estate demand in Dubai alone has gone up 67% in the first quarter of the year.
That's a lot.
That's a whole lot, more than 50%, where Russians, and there are luxury demands also, because, it's only the big guys that can
make this kind of moves.
So,
right.
They're getting it big in Dubai at this time.
Now, while that is happening, the EU is banning Russians from buying real estate.
Yes.
Should I ask why? Because that would have been an obvious answer.
To ask why. There's no need to ask why, because, just as we said now, real estate seems to be... I know some time ago there was a report how money laundering seems to be going the way of real estate these days. So that's part of the reason. So it's convenient, it's comfortable, you buy a property. So that's why the EU, I'm sure they have also noticed what's going on in the UAE in the area of real estate. So that's why they're putting this. So while Russians, about 200,000 Russians have left the country since the war started. So They have to go somewhere. They have to leave somewhere. So I guess the EU is trying to make it uncomfortable for them. So that's why you have these restrictions, no transfer of ownership, except those who have the permanent permit of EU, or they are now citizens, of course, because they are citizens.
Citizens, you can't touch them.
Exactly. But if they have Russian citizenship, they cannot buy, they cannot transfer or any form of real estate at this time.
Air cargo volumes are slumping.
Yes. Remember we talked about...
Indeed.
Yeah.
Would that be about 2 weeks ago now?
Yes. So obviously this is affecting, because some flights have to do longer routes, so it's more expensive. We're talking of jet air, more expensive now. So all of this is... The world is actually feeling it. I heard you talk about the possibility of recession.
Right, with Andrew. Yeah.
Yes, yesterday Juliana also hinted on the possibility of recession in the UK also. The US is also talking about that, because things are not going on normal. Trade volume has drastically dropped. I remember the WTO released some weeks ago some figures showing that global trade volume has dropped. So obviously, supply disruption, transportation, logistics, everything. We talked about ship, the Black Sea and all of that. So it's not just on water, but even air, because even some of those planes, remember, that have been seized by Russia. They can't do any job. They can't move in and out of Russia.
Absolutely.
The grains supply have been disrupted, so it's really gone down and everybody's feeling it.
one thing that has seesawed, and each time I have Ladi or you here, that is something that we talk about and we can't stop talking about, which is the issue of oil
Yes.
and the prices and what supply disruptions have caused. And in many places, as you've just pointed out, that's part of what is stoking inflation because energy prices have gone through the roof.
Yes,
now, the Biden administration wants to buy 60 million barrels.
Yes. Remember, they tried to cushion the impact of the price by going to their reserve. So it's now time, to refill the reserve because reports show that their reserve is down 20-year low. And also because even before now, the lawmakers have been authorizing the sale for revenue for the country. Remember, trying to shore up the revenue of the country. So they've been selling from the reserve. So now with the 180 million barrels per day that's going to be released in 6 months, from the president just to cushion this, they have to do something about it. So that's what the Biden administration is trying to do now. Now, they're warning ahead of time because obviously they have to get bids and buy to, feel that it will affect price again. So I guess we should get ready for that movement.
And one of the things Andrew was saying was that Nigeria as a producer and so on shouldn't be at the receiving end of all of this, and that it would have been an opportunity, but of course we all know why that is not the case.
Yes, it's not the case at this time.
As things stand now, I must ask this from you, because you're watching this all the time. Is it a situation where all of this is feeding into what we see as the markets? Are we having all of this feeding to investor reactions at the markets?
Obviously feeding into it. At one point we saw things like gold surging, palladium surging, because people were looking for, investors in this case, were looking for where to hedge, where to keep their money. The volatility in the oil area was just too uncertain, so people were moving there. So it's feeding into everything. I mean, just the US, yes, they released they hiked their rates, and then the oil went up again more than 100. And then because it didn't go as high as investors had thought it would go, or the forecast had said, then it's tapered again. And then you have the Shanghai, so there's so many factors that are pressuring investors' decision everywhere. But I have to tell you, one thing that seems to be working for Nigeria at this time is the equities market in Nigeria.
We had a bullish run.
Yes. I mean, we even have new highs at this time. We're getting close to 51,000. That is the first time in the history of the market. And no one seems to be able to explain it, except that maybe local investors are trying to hedge and then they're going to equities. So, well, Nigeria is always special. So while other markets, the US, the UK, I mean, even in Europe, yesterday their market slumped. But back here in Nigeria,
it's really looking good. Let's just keep our fingers crossed and see how
as
long
we always say.
Yeah, we can ride that. Thank you so much, Ini, for your perspective this morning. Political advisor to President Volodymyr Zelensky, Oleksiy Arestovich, says Ukraine is unlikely to launch a counter-offensive against Russia before mid-June, when it hopes to receive more weapons from allies. He also says he does not expect Russia's offensive in Ukraine to produce any, quote, significant results by Russia's so-called Victory Day on May the 9th, when it celebrates defeating a Nazi Germany in World War II. He says fighting is ongoing at the Azovstal steelworks plant, where Ukrainian fighters and some civilians are holed up in the city of Mariupol. Meanwhile, leaders at a donor conference to raise funds to help Ukraine.
People have made it out of Mariupol thanks to mediation efforts by the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross. Over 300 civilians were evacuated from Mariupol and other areas in southern Ukraine as part of a joint UN Red Cross operation that concluded on Wednesday. Many of the evacuees were relieved, having spent 2 months in a bunker. Many cherished the sun-drenched first day of their freedom. But there are still many more at the Azovstal steel plant. Deputy Commander of Ukraine's Azov Regiment, in a video posted online, spoke of heavy, bloody fighting going on for the defenders of the city, who have been fighting the overpowering enemy forces, he praised the resilience of the Ukrainian forces. Mariupol is not the only city under attack, even though it's currently a hotbed. Russian shelling is reportedly continuing in the region of Donetsk, in the country's eastern region. An international donors conference held on Thursday, co-hosted by Poland and Sweden in Warsaw to collect funds for Ukraine. Poland's Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki said $6.5 billion was raised to help the war-torn country.
Thank you for all the pledges. I have just received the final number, and I'm very glad to announce that all of us managed to mobilize $6.5 billion. These are pledges which were put, and thank you.
Other leaders at the conference voiced support for Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron, who joined virtually, said France will increase its overall financial aid to Ukraine this year to $12 billion, up from $1.7 billion. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky continues to push for EU membership, telling the donors conference that Ukraine needs a fast path to the continental bloc with practical steps.
Let's take a look at some of the sports news here. Russia has claimed a partial victory against sporting sanctions being applied to the country after table tennis clubs were reinstated to a key event. The European Table Tennis Union Board of Appeal ruled in favor of the Russian Table Tennis Federation, Fakel Gazprom Orenburg and TTSC Oma Yekaterinburg, bringing back the two clubs into this season's Champions League. It was decided that the clubs should not be viewed as representatives of their country, and according to Silla International Lawyers, the law firm which represented the clubs, the ban was recognized as discriminatory. However, the board rejected the appeal to overturn the ban on Russian and Belarusian national teams, as well as the barring of their national symbols, flags, and anthems at competitions. Ukrainian Olympians Irina Sheptyuk, Valery Litinyuk, Viktor Polyakov, and Seven Suleimanov attended an educational charity event for children from the country who have been displaced from their families. The event, which was called Ukrainian Children, a Ukrainian Book, saw the youngsters taught about the Olympic movement, as well as being shown demonstrations of boxing and judo at the Ivano Frankivich Regional School. Suleimanov boxed at the Sydney 2000, while Polyakov competed in the same sport 4 years later in Athens. Sheptyuk was part of Ukraine's 4x100 meters relay team at Beijing 2008, while Litinyuk participated in the men's 50-kilometer walk at the Tokyo 2020 Games. And finally, two Ukrainian sisters who fled the besieged city of Mariupol in a rushed and dangerous journey say they did not even get to say goodbye to their mother and hope to be reunited. Nicole and Vera, who declines to give their surname, fearing for the safety of their relatives left behind in Mariupol, said they have no information on the fate of their family and no way to contact them. Nicole, 21 years old, said the two sisters left a handwritten note on the table of the apartment they lived on April the 1st for their mother to discover before making their escape with Vera's 4-year-old. In mid-April, the two received a phone call from an unknown number, which turned out to be their mother. They spoke to her once more, but the calls have now stopped. Nicole said she has urged her family to try and leave the city, but fears they don't have access to information. And it's on that note that we end this morning's show. Thanks for being with us. I'm Ladi Akiridulali. There's an update at 5 o'clock, so you can watch after that. Thanks for watching. Do enjoy your weekend.